Good morning, Mr. Pretorius. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chair.
Are we ready?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Please administer the oath again.
Please state your full names for the record.
Edwin Sodi.
Do you have any objection to taking the prescribed oath?
No, I don't.
Do you consider the oath to be binding on your conscience?
I do.
Do you swear that the evidence will give will be the truth, the whole truth and nothing else but the truth? If so, please raise your right hand and say, "So help me God."
So help me.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you, Chair.
let's continue.
Mr. Sodi, I'd like for a short while to go back to the position in Khateng, where your company, Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, did work for the Khateng government.
Okay.
If you would look, please, at Free State 1, the bundles behind you.
That is bundle FS1.
Yes, the spines haven't been
I've got it,
changed
yeah.
on all the bundles, Chair, but
Mr. Pretorius, I can't hear you. I don't know if it's the aircon noise. I think they'll sort out the aircon noise. You might have to raise your voice.
yes, Chair. In fact, if we could ask that the aircon be switched off.
Yeah, I think they will do that. I think they will do that. I think you were saying something about the bundles behind him. That's what I did not hear.
Yes, Chair, it's not an important point, but we will refer to FS1 at page 406. Do you have that?
Did you say 406?
Yes.
Yes.
And we are using the black numbers again. 406.
FS1 406. Do you have that in front of you?
I do.
Mr. Sodi, that is what we have referred to in evidence previously as a service level agreement applicable to the appointment of a panel.
That's correct.
So each member of the panel would have entered into a service level agreement of this nature.
That's correct, Chair.
This does not contain any contractual terms and conditions, for example, price or the nature of the work to be done.
That's correct, Chair.
As you've told us, that's contained in an instruction to perform work, IPW.
That's correct, Chair.
This agreement, in its own terms, appears to have expired after a duration of 36 months. It was a 3-year service level agreement.
That's correct, Chair. It was a 3-year service level agreement, but I do recall that it was extended from time to time after it expired.
Yes.
Right up until, I think, late 2014.
Yes, we'll come to that extension in a moment.
Yeah.
But before it was extended, it would at least have expired 3 months after the date of signature, which appears on page 452 of FS1. We're looking at the black numbers in the top left-hand corner.
Mr. Pretorius, I'm not supposed to give it its own exhibit number and have it admitted as not a standalone document.
Well, up to now, we have been,
I think the arrangement was we would deal with them as and when you get to them, the different documents in terms of getting them admitted, those that are standalone documents.
DCJ, the document that we're talking about is Annexure E. The sig- of this SLA was effected on the 14th of September 2010. You recall that, Mr. Sodi? You'll see that on page 452 of FS1.
That's correct, Chair.
So it would have expired, but for the extension 3 months after the 14th of September 2010.
That's correct.
3 months or 3 years?
Sorry, 3 years. Apologies, Chair. 36 months. That, as I understood your evidence, was a service level agreement entered into by each service provider on a panel of between 50 and 60 service providers.
That's correct, Chair.
The agreement well, let me put it another way. Let me deal with that now, rather. That agreement was extended, and if we look at FS 8159, you've just told the Chair that that agreement was extended to the month of August 2014. You said late August 2014. Is this the extension letter?
That's the extension letter, Chair.
It's addressed to you, attention Edwin Sodi of Blackhead Consulting. You see that?
I see that.
And it's dated the 13th of May 2014.
That's correct, Chair.
What happened between September 2013, when it would have expired, and the date of this letter, the 13th of May 2014?
This could have been the second extension, Chair. I would not recall, but this letter probably refers to the second extension because it would have expired the previous year.
All right, we haven't seen that letter, nor have the investigators been able to obtain any further correspondence than that.
Yeah, I don't think I've got a letter either, Chair, but it
Yes.
should have been the...
Well, the first paragraph of the letters suggests that there may have been a prior extension
That's correct.
because it says this letter serves to advise Blackhead Consulting that the contract to provide professional resource teams services to the department is extended by 5 months from 1 April 2014 to 31 August 2014. And so it suggests that there may have been a prior extension because otherwise they would extend it from September 2013.
That's correct, Chair. I do recall that it was more than one extension, definitely. But I don't seem to have the first extension letter. This would be the second one.
It's signed by a Ms. Margaret Ann Diedrichs. Who was she?
She was the acting head of department at the time.
In Khateng.
In Khateng, correct, yeah.
And you would have been doing work for that department for a period of at least 3 to 4 years.
That's correct, Chair.
Do you recall receiving more than one extension letter?
I recall that the extension was done more than once.
More
Chair,
than once.
but I don't seem to recall getting more than one letter.
Did Ms. Diedrich sign both letters or just one?
I'm not sure, Chair. She came in the department, I think after the HOD then had resigned, and she came in an acting capacity. I cannot recall the exact dates on which she came in. So it's possible that she could have signed the first one, or it could have been the previous HOD who resigned. I can't recall those details, unfortunately.
Then if we could go please to FS 8 at page 88.
Yeah, I'm there, Chair.
This is a memorandum that has been dealt with in evidence, which motivates the initiation of a plan to eradicate asbestos roofs in Khateng. It's dated the 13th of March 2014. You recall the initiation of that plan. You've spoken about it.
We've spoken about this, yeah. I do
Yes.
recall this, yeah.
And it's addressed to Margaret Ann Diedrichs, and as you said, she was, and you knew her to be the acting head of department of the Khateng Province Human Settlements. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Now, this document, although it's a memorandum, sets out certain terms and conditions, including on page 91 of FS8, a rate of 650 Rand per house.
That's correct.
And attached to it, well, first of all, let's go to the recommendations in the memo.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius. Did you say the rate is at page 91? Oh, yes, I can see it. Okay, no, you may continue.
You have it, Chair.
Yeah.
That's a fixed rate, not subject to any variations. I think we've dealt with that.
Correct.
And we've also dealt with the fact that at page 92, this memorandum recommended the appointment of 8 professional resource teams.
That's correct.
And appointment in terms of attached terms of reference. And those terms of reference appear at page 94 of FS8. And on page 98, there is a detailed scope of the work to be done. You see that?
I see that, Chair.
And we've dealt with some of that, including the particular paragraph 5.1 on page 98, where the detail of the scope of work is set out in the terms of reference. Those would have been incorporated, I presume, in an instruction to perform work later issued to you,
That's correct, yeah.
including the price of 650 Rand.
Correct.
And this provided for the appointment of 8 service providers,
That's correct.
of which Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited was one.
That's correct.
The income from the asbestos work that Blackhead Consulting did in Khateng, you told the investigators in an interview that the income was approximately 200 million rand. Is that correct?
Well, Chair, we were appointed for, to audit approximately, I'm speaking under correction, in the region of about 250,000 units. So the income would have been 250,000 multiplied by the 650 rands. So that would have been the total value of the project would have been 250,000 multiplied by 650 rands.
Yeah, I think in terms of the transcript of the interview, you put it in the region of 200 million, if I'm not mistaken. Or some
It could have been, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it could have been, yeah.
Well, let's just go to what you said. It's in FS 6 at page 268.
Okay, I'm there, Chair.
Right. At FS 6268 line 10, one of the investigators, Mr. Gerard Swanepoel, asks a question. He says, okay, so last question from my side around Khateng now. How much money did you make on the Khateng audit? And then Mr. Edwin Sodi, I think it was about in the region of about 200 million rand. Mr. Gerard Swanepoel, no, that's the total. How much did you, and then there's some exchange of words between you, polite words, and you reply further down the page, Mr. Edwin Sodi, yes it was, I mean I can give you the exact figure, but it was in the region of about 200 million rand. So that was your profit, says Mr. Swanepoel. No, says Mr. Sodi, it was the total, right? And then over the page, FS 6269, in relation to the profit, perhaps we should go back to the question on page 268. Mr. Swanepoel says to you, so that's my question. You got a total amount paid by the department for the work. How much profit did you make? And over the page, Mr. Edwin Sodi, it would have been about 60% of that, more or less 50 to 60% of that. And you say you were very happy with that. So the exchange here indicates that, as far as you were aware, certainly at the time of the interview, you would have made at least 100 million rand in the Khateng Asbestos Project.
Well, give or take, Chair. We were appointed for 650 rands per house. And if I recall, our cost for doing the work was between 300 and 350. The balance would have been profit. So that's how I arrived at it.
Yes. We have more precise figures later, but for the present, just to establish that your profit would have been, and I stress, in the region of 100 million rand.
Well, I'm not sure. It looks like much more than that.
No.
Because if he says the cost was about 300,000,
Average, so I'm saying, the chair, that our cost per house was in the region of between 300 and 350 rands.
or 300, or rents,
Yes,
not, yeah.
so
yeah.
if
And
you
then for
minus
the
the
whole-
350 from the 600, you're left with 300. That would have been more or less our profit margin.
Yes, but,
per house.
but looking at how many houses you were to do, if
Then,
you were,
yes.
if your cost per house was about 300 rand, then for all the houses, then wouldn't you be looking at more or less 300,000 in terms of total cost? Were the houses not about 300? Or were they 200 and something?
No, it wasn't. It was less than that.
300,000 was Free State.
That's correct, yeah.
Gauteng was what?
It was
200 and
between,
something?
yeah, it was about 250,000.
Yes.
Yeah.
But actually, if they were less than 300, then that increases your profit compared to if they were 300,000.
No, it doesn't, because your profit margin, in this case, is calculated per house. So, depending on the number of houses that we would have been appointed for. So, in other words, if it was 250,000 houses, for instance, and we're making a profit margin of 300 rands per house, we would multiply the 250,000 by 300, and that would give us more or less the profit margin.
Yes. We are probably on the same page, but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The 300 rand per house would have been your cost, not your profit, or would it have been your profit?
Yeah, so I'm saying, Chair, between 300 and 350,
Yeah.
that was the cost. So in
That
other
was
words,
the cost, yeah.
that was the cost. In other words, that's the money that we spent to do the actual job. So
Yeah.
it would have been,
Anything outside of that amount would,
yeah, so it would have been,
anything outside of that 300 rand or 350 rand per house would have been profit.
that's correct, Chair.
Yes. Now, if you were doing 300 units, 300 houses, okay, remember that the amount that you are going to be paid for the whole project, as I understand, is not going to change. It's not going to change. It's fixed.
That's correct.
So if you were doing, if the houses in Gauteng were 300 that you had to do, and you are the
You mean,
cost
you mean
per
300,000?
300,000, yes.
It was less, it was about 250,000. But
Yeah,
I
but
followed
let's say
yeah.
for argument's sake, because I talked about 300,000 earlier.
Yeah.
Let's say if they were 300,000, the houses in Gauteng, and let us say for argument's sake, your cost was 300 rand per house, okay? The proposition I was putting to you earlier on, with which you seem to disagree, and maybe we were not on the same
Maybe
page,
maybe I
was
misunderstood your
that
question, yeah.
if there were 300 houses and you were spending 300 rand per house, your profit would be less than if you had 250 houses. In other words, the lesser the number of houses, the more profit you made. The higher the number of houses, the less profit you make.
Okay.
Because the total amount is fixed, you are not going to change.
Yes, the
Yes,
total
you see.
amount is fixed.
It's fixed, but if you are going to do more houses on
Yeah.
the same price, obviously you'll make less profit, isn't it?
Yeah, so maybe let me explain it this way.
The lesser the number of houses
Yeah.
you make, because the total amount that is coming to your company from the department is the same.
Correct.
The lesser the number of houses you make,
Yeah.
the more profit you are going to do. The more houses that they say you must do, the less your profit is going to be. Is it not logical?
I'm not sure if that is entirely correct, Chair, and it could be that maybe we're talking about the numbers.
Let me put it this way.
Yeah.
If they said they were going to give you, what was the total amount in Khateng that they were going to give you, the total amount?
650 rands.
Let's say for 300 houses, for 250 houses.
250,000.
Yeah, and what was the total amount for 250 houses that they were going to give you? More or less.
Well, maybe we can get someone to do
Oh,
a quick
okay,
calculator and
okay, all
multiply.
right. Anyway, let us assume they were going to give you 200 million
Yeah.
for you to do 100 houses at, and your cost is 300 rand per house. The rest is your profit. Obviously, you will make more profit than if they say, no, you must actually do 100,000 houses for the same price.
Chair, the total amount of, or the total value of the project is dependent on the total number of houses that you audit. So using the same figures that you're mentioning, if in this case it was 250,000 houses, our total revenue would be the 250,000 houses multiplied by the 650. So it's linked to the quantities that had to be audited or assessed. If, for instance, the scope was, let's say, 100,000 houses, then it should have been 100,000 houses multiplied by 650 rands. So obviously, the less number of houses that you do means that your total revenue would be less. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if
if the total amount changes. If
Yeah,
the total
so-
amount changes.
Yeah. So
But
so
I
what
think
is
the point
key-
you are making is,
Yeah.
the point you are making is the total amount is based on a certain number of houses.
No, I'm saying that we were given a rate of 650. And we were then given quantities that we had to audit and assess. So in this case, it was,
I'm sorry. What is happening?
It's just that I think the witness would be assisted if he could have a pen and paper to make his own
Okay,
calculations.
okay. I need to know, otherwise. Yes.
yeah. So the point I was alluding to is that, so your rate is determined, in this case, predetermined, and they say, here is the rate, and then we get given a scope of work to do. So in our case, it was 250,000 units, which we had to audit. All right? So the total revenue, as I said, was therefore the 650 multiplied by the 250,000. But as it turned out, Chair, we audited about 200,000 more than the scope that was given to us. However, our revenue was fixed on the scope that was given to us. So the department didn't say, Blackhead, you were given 250,000, you came back, you've done the work, you've assessed, We see your report, but the report says you've done 400,000. So therefore, we paying you for 400,000. It wasn't the case. So they said,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes. No, I understand.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that you would agree that if you were assigned to do 250 houses
yeah,
for a certain fixed rate, and you ended up doing 400 houses, and for each house you were paying 300, your cost was 300 rand. Now, instead of your cost being limited to 250 units, your cost is now for 400 units, and you won't be paid for the extra.
Absolutely, you're correct.
So that extra
yes.
from
Reduces
251 reduces your
That's
profit.
correct. That's correct.
That,
yeah.
that was the
Oh, is that the point?
yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, okay.
You're absolutely correct. Chair.
Okay, all right. Mr. Pretorius?
Yes, we were going to deal with it later, but perhaps we should complete this line of inquiry now. Firstly, let's just recap, Mr. Sodi, what you told the investigators. As I understand it, on FS 6268, you said that Khateng paid you in the region of 200 million rand. That's what you said.
Give or take, Chair. Yeah.
Yes. And then you said on page 269 of FS6 that of that amount, 50 to 60% of that would have been profit, and the calculations can then be done, at least 100 million rand would have been profit,
Give or take.
give or take. If one does another calculation on what you say here, you say 300 rand per house would have been profit. If one multiplies 300 by 250,000, one gets 75 million. You can trust the
That's correct.
calculator on that.
Yeah, we'll trust the calculator on that, yeah.
Okay. But there is another document that the investigators produced on inquiry from the Khateng Department of Human Settlements, and that appears in FS8 at page 111. And if it will assist you when we go through this table, if you want to write down the amounts on that piece of paper your attorney has kindly provided for you. This is a document from the Department of Human Settlements that the investigators speak to in their overall report.
Yeah, I can see that.
It lists 4 payments related to, do you have it, Chair? It deals with 4 payments: Khateng Asbestos Joburg North, Khateng Asbestos Ekurhuleni, Khateng Asbestos Joburg North, Khateng Asbestos Ekurhuleni, and lists the amount authorized and paid in relation to 4 claims arising out of those projects.
That's correct.
Payments to Blackhead Consulting Pty, CC there. You see that?
I see that.
The total of those 4 amounts is 229 million rand 710,000, but that includes VAT. If one takes VAT away, the total amount is 201 million 500,000. You see that?
Yeah.
And if you divide that amount by 650 rand, the amount per house, one gets 310,000 units. Those are the calculations that appear from this document. Do you recall how that could have come about? Do you want me to go through those figures again?
I'm not sure how that, I mean, these figures, I would imagine, I'm seeing this document for the first time, Chair. But I would imagine that this refers to the 4 IPWs that were issued, Chair, to Blackhead Consulting.
For the
to go
asbestos
and
project.
audit in those 4 areas that are specified here on this sheet. I cannot, say for sure those are the exact amounts. I haven't seen this document, but it may very well be.
Yes.
Yeah.
These are human settlements records.
Okay.
And these record amounts paid to Blackhead totaling, excluding VAT, 201,500,000 rand. But in any event, apart from the 1,500,000, your recollection and this information more or less coincides.
My recollection with regard to these 4 different areas is correct in as far as the spreadsheet, this document is concerned. I cannot for sure say, Chair, that these amounts are exactly what is reflected on the IPWs. It could be that it's the same amounts, but I'm not sure, Chair, if perhaps Mr. Pretorius might have the copies of the actual IPWs, because that would be quite helpful.
Well, we've got copies of the invoices. Would you like to see those?
That's fine, we can have a look at those.
The first invoice is at FS 8, page 127.
Yes, I can see that.
That is an invoice if you would bear with me a moment here. In the amount of 59,280, which is the second invoice on the table on FS 8111.
I can verify that, Chair, it's correct.
Right. So there, at least there's a coincidence
Yep,
between your invoice and the payment.
that's correct, yeah.
One goes to 134. Sorry, no, I'm giving you the wrong number. Page, yes, it is 134 of FS 8. There is the amount of a total claim by Blackhead Consulting to the Department of Housing, as was the last invoice, in the amount of 32,604,000.
That's correct, I can confirm that, Chair.
Right. The third one is at page 144. $88,920,000 invoice to the Department of Housing, Khateng Provincial Government by Blackhead Consulting. That coincides with the last amount on the table.
That's correct, Chair.
And then on page 151, total claim 48,906,000 invoiced by Blackhead Consulting to the Department of Housing, Khateng Provincial Government.
That's correct.
So we know then that the table shown at Free State 8 or FS 8111 coincides with your own records.
That's correct, Chair.
So let's go back to FS 811 if we may. The total of the amounts in that table is 229,710,000. But that includes VAT.
Okay.
Excluding VAT,
I'm sorry, Mr. Pretorius, that's your own, that's a number that doesn't, a figure that doesn't appear on the
Yes.
page, is that right?
yes, Chair.
And it's 229?
229,710,000.
Okay, thank you.
But that includes VAT. So the calculation I'm putting, and on which I am relying at my peril, Chair,
Yeah,
is 201,500,000, excluding VAT.
201 million?
500,000, excluding VAT.
1,000.
So
That's the profit you calculate based on the 50%.
yes, Chair. Well,
Reference.
whatever the rate was at that time.
Yes, okay.
In any event, simply, Mr. Sodi, your recollection in the interview is more or less, give or take 1,500,000 rand, the same as the amount that this spreadsheet shows as having been paid to you for the asbestos project in Khateng.
Sorry, Chair, I'm not sure. Where does the 1,500,000 come from?
I'm sorry, actually, before that,
All
Mr.
right.
Pretorius, so,
Yeah.
yeah. And this was over how long a period?
Chair, I'm speaking under correction. This could have been over anywhere between 3 and 5 months or 6 months around there. 3 and about 6 months.
Between 3 months to 6 months?
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yes.
I can't recall exactly how long it
Yes.
took us.
Okay.
But I do know that we were able to complete the project on record time because we had appointed a lot of people, field workers that we deployed in the various areas that we appointed. So we were able to finish and complete the project on record time.
By the way, how much time had you been given to complete the project? Are you able to remember? If you can't find it, I'm sure we can find it later.
I'm not sure if it's specified on the actual IPW.
But
No, it's not specified here,
but you finished it much earlier than
no,
the
much
time.
earlier.
Much earlier.
Yeah.
But it was not more than 12 months that you were given, as you remember.
No, definitely not.
It was less than 12 months.
No, way less than that.
But
yeah.
you finished it within about 6 months.
It could have been even less than that.
Even less than
Yeah,
6 months.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And the number of workers that you had to employ to do this, is that something you are able to remember? In what region you might be?
Chair.
That might be.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't remember the exact number of people, but
over 100 maybe?
Oh no, definitely. It was
Definitely more than 100.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, but their income would have been derived from the costs of the project.
Correct. Yeah.
Just one calculation then I'd like to put to you. The amount of 201,500,000 rand, the amount excluding VAT, if one divides that by 650 rand per unit, one gets an amount of 310,000 houses. How do you explain that then? Can you explain?
Chair, I'm not sure why you would work it out that way, because the 650 rand is inclusive of VAT, and the 201 million is excluding VAT.
All right, well, we'll redo that calculation.
Yeah. Okay.
But let's just go to a question that the chair asked. If one goes to FS8 at page 100, this is the memorandum we referred to earlier, in terms of which the instructions to perform work would have been issued for the 8 service providers to be appointed for the project. And there, in paragraph 7, a time frame of 8 weeks
Yeah.
was set. Do you recall that time frame?
I seem to recall that now. Yeah.
Was that the time frame
I
within
think that was a
which the
time
work had
frame
to
that
be
was.
completed?
Yeah.
It's 2 months.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to the issue of the profit that Blackhead Consulting made. On the basis of its profit having been 50% of the total value of the project, Blackhead Consulting made about 100 million rand.
Correct, Chair.
Okay. In circumstances where it did about 400 houses,
Correct, Chair? More or less.
Yeah, more or less, instead of 250. It actually almost doubled.
Almost doubled the scope that was given to us, correct?
Yeah, almost doubled the number of houses that it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
If it had done 250, its profit would have been much
A little bit more, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That's correct.
Now, doesn't that suggest that the price for the house, for the 250 units was quite high?
Chair, you'd recall the last time I was here, I mentioned that when we were appointed on this exercise, we were given a rate. None of us knew what we were going to come across, because this had never been done before. No one had this sort of experience to refer to the past, to say that based on the past, this is more or less how much we're going to make. But in any event, we did not negotiate for the rate with the department. It wasn't a choice that was given to us. This was, as I said, we used the word, or the sentence, take it or leave it. It was the department say, guys, we have done our own exercise. We now want to appoint service providers who can go and do this audit or assessment, and we are going to pay each one of you this amount. Now, we take this appointment and we start working. And it's only afterwards, when you're done with the project, then you basically look at your expenses and how much you would have spent and so forth, then you're able to determine how much you would have made. So we wouldn't have known upfront whether the rate was high or low. We wouldn't have known that. And it would obviously, again, lead on to what happened in the Free State, was that this is a precedent now. In a way, this is a precedent that has been set, that more or less, 650 rands is the rate that you would pay, for this kind of work. The Commission's own witness who came here also alluded to that fact, because that question was posed to him, to say, more or less, how much would it cost to do this kind of work? And if my memory serves me well, Chair, he mentioned that it should be around the region of 600. This is a specialist who's been in the industry for many, many years, much more experienced than any one of us. So one would therefore arrive at a conclusion that to do this kind of work, based on what the experts are saying, would be around that sort of region. Of course, it does suggest that, based on our own experience as well, that it's a profitable project. There's nothing wrong with it. It's very profitable. Say, it happens. You get projects that are less profitable in our industry, where you take a project, some you even make a loss. And
But
you
the
do
point,
get projects where
I think the point you are making, there are only 2 points you are making about this. One, you didn't decide on the rate per house.
That's exactly.
Department made that decision and said, you take it or leave it. 2, you are saying that you didn't know how many houses you would end up doing. It could be 250. it could be more. You took your chances, and it worked the way it
You're
worked.
absolutely correct, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Pretorius?
I understood from your answer, Mr. Sodi, that when you went into the project, you didn't know how much profit you would make because it was a new project and it would be a learning experience for your company.
That's correct, Chair. That's correct.
So insofar as one might say that 100 million rand profit over 2 months is excessive in the circumstances, that would have been based on the fact that you made a mistake in overcharging, if it was an overcharge. But you say in any event, I understand it, that you didn't overcharge, this was fair profit.
I did not overcharge because, as I had indicated, I did not, submit a price to the department and say, pay me X amount. It was a price that was predetermined, that was given to all the 8 service providers that were appointed. And as I said, it was profitable and we were quite happy with it. But at the beginning, when we were appointed, I had no idea at that point in time how much it was going to cost us to execute this project. We took a chance and said, look, let's go for it. And it turned out that it became a profitable project. And, as a business person, I was quite happy with the profit margins that we made. So I do not consider that, Chair, to have been an overcharge, simply on the basis that we were not given an opportunity to negotiate the rate. It was given to us. Yeah.
Well, the first issue that one might raise, and let's place it at the door of the Department of Human Settlements for the moment, Mr. Sodi, is that this budget is meant for service delivery in respect of people who do not possess enough money to live in decent housing. That's what the budget more or less is about, and that's what this project was about. Correct?
Chair, this project, as I had indicated, was about getting service providers to go out and do an assessment of the number of houses within the province that are roofed with asbestos, so that the department can then be able to plan accordingly. Because remember, the end goal has always been to eradicate asbestos. So this budget was about that. It was about to say, guys, we know we have a challenge. And as I indicated previously the last time I was here, was what triggered this? It was that huge hailstorm that happened in late 2013. That was the trigger, because what was established was that a lot of the damaged roofs were asbestos roofs. And as I indicated, that caught the department off guard, because we're like, look, we know there is this problem, but we just don't have an idea of how much it's going to cost us to deal with it. And the only way that we'll be able to get an idea is to actually get this assessment done. And that is what led now to the appointment of the 8 contractors, to say, guys, assist us in determining and giving us accurate information as to the number of houses, the pre-1994 stock, that we have in the province, so that we can then be able to put a budget for the eradication. So the 650 rands was just for the audit. That's what it was meant for, nothing else, and nothing beyond that. I would imagine that there would have been a separate budget, which I wouldn't have knowledge of, that was probably set aside for the actual eradication. were not involved in that. But this particular one we're speaking about now, Chair, was simply just for the audit and assessment.
Mr. Sodi, the proposition is a straightforward one. In the space of 2 months, in an asbestos eradication project in the Department of Human Settlements, they paid an amount of over 200 million rand, allowing a private company to make approximately 100 million rand. That's the fact.
It is a fact.
Whether that's a good or bad thing, we can leave it to those who are empowered to make judgments to judge.
It is a fact. It was an exercise, Chair, that had to be done, and the department went ahead and did it, and they paid for it.
Yes, but the point I'm making to you is that this money comes from a budget that is supposed to provide service delivery to poor people.
Chair, the budget allocated to, and I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of the department, because I'm not qualified to do that. But the budget that gets allocated to various departments, including the Department of Human Settlements, one would safely assume that it's meant for services, to provide services, in this case, to provide human settlements, or build houses for indigent people and so forth. So yeah, to answer your question, the amount or the budget utilized would have been used to, would have been meant to provide for services for people that otherwise cannot afford. And I see this as being part of that. It may not have been utilized, for instance, to build the actual houses, but it's a human settlement function, and it was used for that, for that function, which is human settlements.
How much time would your company have spent in training the field workers who would visit the different houses?
Chair, it wasn't long. It could have been a day.
A day?
Yeah, it could have been a day. But it wasn't long. I mean, the training was not complicated training.
Yes.
So it wouldn't have taken...
You know what? I thought that keeps on worrying me, and this applies to the Free State, but we'll talk about it, about the Free State soon. Is if the training that is necessary to be given to the field workers who will visit the different houses in order for them to obtain the necessary information is simple and straightforward. Well, maybe takes a day, maybe less than a day. Whether it wouldn't have been a better idea to say each household must make available somebody from the household who would attend that training, get that information from their own house, and for which they would not need to charge. The department would now not have to pay that person because that family wants the house to be improved themselves. So in other words, your company could be obtained, but to the extent that it's necessary, actually you say, look, each household, well, I don't know whether you needed matric for every person who would attend the training, but even if you needed matric, I'm sure there would have been many households who would have somebody who could do that, to say,
Yeah.
if you want, we want to check if your house has got an asbestos roof, because we need to improve your housing, your living conditions. The houses that have got asbestos roofs the roofs should be removed in due course, and another roofing be put in place. It's for your benefit. Make one person from the household or family available in order to assist with this.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to, the department doesn't have to pay, saves a lot on what has to be paid.
Chair, that could be a way of looking at it, but how we executed this is not very far or different to what you're proposing, because what happened was, in every locality or ward that we went to, we first had to engage the ward councillors. And we then said to the ward councillors, listen, there is this project that ought to be undertaken. We have a criteria of the people that we require. Because remember, Chair, it's not, it was not just about looking at the house and, and making an opinion. There was a set of questions that were compiled, and some gadgets that were utilized. So the questions would have been incorporated into the gadget. So obviously, you would have needed someone with a basic literacy to understand exactly what needs to happen, because we didn't want to produce a report or inferior report to the client. We wanted to make sure that whatever information that we provide to the client is information that's credible. Now, we were specific that we want to use local people in those areas where we're doing the assessment. And we said to the ward councillors, you go, this is a set of criteria. You go and identify these people, okay? And you come back to us. We'll give you the exact number of people that we need. So if in one area, for instance, we wanted to employ 200 people, we'd say, we want 200 people, so go and find these people. Here is the criteria, and come back and give us a list of those people. And that's what happened. The ward councillors would call meetings, community meetings, and they will deal with that and say, look, there's going to be a project, in our locality. It's also job creation, okay? So there's going to be a job creation component, and we need so many people, maybe 50% women, maybe 50% youth, but there was a criteria. And that's what happened.
But the long and short is simply, you are saying that the way you did it is not very dissimilar to what I'm saying.
Correct.
And I take it that you are saying you think it could have been done that way, but it was done this way. Of course, what I'm saying is the department could have spent less on the project if it was on the basis that I've indicated. Would you accept that?
They could have spent,
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
could have spent.
Mr. Pretorius?
Thank you, Chair.
I see we are about close to tea time, but you might
Perhaps
have...
we should take the short adjournment.
Okay, all right. Let's take the tea adjournment. We'll resume at 11:30.
Thank you,
We
Chair.
adjourn. Let's continue. And just for the sake of completeness, Mr. Sodi, on the question that I asked before the adjournment, was it a requirement for the trainees or field workers to have matric, or was that not a requirement?
Chair, if my memory serves me well, that was a requirement.
That was a requirement.
I think so, yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Sodi, let's go back to FS 8111, that table we discussed earlier. You told us in answer to a calculation put to you that the unit price of 650 Rand per house included VAT. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair, according to
So
my
if one applies the calculation to the amount of 229,710,000, which also includes VAT, one would be dealing like with like, as I understand it.
correct, so the 229, Chair,
Includes VAT.
includes that.
So if you divide 229,710,000 by 650, you can check it if you like, if you've got a cell phone there. One would get 353,400 houses. In other words, if you charged 650 Rand, including VAT, for each unit, and you came to a total charge of 229,710,000, you would have charged for 353,400 houses, not 250,000. Do you want to check that calculation?
Chair, I think maybe before we even do that, if I may make a suggestion, with your permission, is to look at the 4 IPWs that we referred to, because those IPWs would have the quantities there, as to how many, units must be assessed. So we can check that, because then we know that we're talking about accurate information.
Well, the IPW...
Was 250 not an accurate number for houses?
Well, I said more or
More or
less,
less,
it was, yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, let me see if,
Sorry, if I may just make one comment by way of a question. Does the
okay.
IPW not tell you what work you should do, not deal with what work you have done and for which you charge?
No, the IPW deals with what needs to happen.
Yes. Not what happened.
No. It deals with what should happen.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you wanted to establish the exact number of
Yeah,
units.
so
That's
that
what you wanted to.
so that
yeah.
we don't.
Do you know where we find the?
Sorry, I'm actually looking at one here. So this is the invoice. Sorry, I'm just looking for where.
Just 1 second. I'm not going to have to say this noise must stop now. If I hear that noise again, I'll kick you out. Yes, Mr. Proteus.
Yes, we were just allowing Mr. Sodi to
Yeah.
find the IPWs. relevant to those charges?
Yeah, we looked at them, Mr. Pretorius. I can't remember which page.
We looked at the invoices. Do you
Oh,
want
we looked at
those?
the invoices. Oh, okay.
The invoices,
Do you
I
not-
can give you, do you want the references?
Do you not have copies of the IPWs in the file? Because I think that would assist us a great deal, so at least we know that we're talking about the exact numbers.
Well, we could do that exercise over the long adjournment and come
Yeah,
back to you.
because that would, you know, give us accurate information.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if there are any in these files. Because that would be quite helpful, Chair.
I'm told at an initial glance that they're not there, but we will check that.
Yeah.
And come back to you. But let's
Correct.
just establish the sequence. The IPW tells you what work you should do.
Yeah, so the IPW tells you exactly what needs to happen. It details, Chair, the amount that would be payable. It also details how that payment would be made.
Yes.
But
But
and
as-
it would also indicate, if my memory serves me well, it would also indicate the quantities that had to be.
That had to be done.
That had to
But
be
as I understand your evidence, Mr. Sodi, you did more than you had to do.
We definitely did more than what the IPW stipulated.
So the IPW would not be an accurate guide as to what work you actually did. The most accurate guide would be the charge levied per house.
No, that's not correct. Irrespective of the number of houses over and above that we did, we would still be paid according to the IPW, Chair. So again, going back to, what I stated earlier, we audited more than we were supposed to audit. So if you look at, take for instance, Joburg North on that spreadsheet on page 111, okay? It gives you the project description, the amount, and so forth. That amount that's specified there will not change because we would have done more. It will still be the same amount. And like I said, I can safely, state that we did way more than we were supposed to. But what we get paid, it's still in accordance with the IPW. It's not based on what we found on the ground.
But I think the principle that Mr. Pretorius may be seeking your comment on is that whatever the number of houses were that the IPW talked about, there should be, you should be able, or rather the total amount paid to Blackhead should be made up of 650 multiplied by the number of houses that you were asked to do.
Correct, Chair.
And he was saying, if one looks at 229,710,000 francs, and you go back to saying the rate is 650 rand per unit, you don't come out with 250,000 units, but you did say that
Yeah.
that was not an exact
That it's not,
figure,
yes.
But you accept the principle.
I accept the principle.
Yes,
And that is why, Chair, I was
Yes.
saying that if we are able
Yeah, to get the correct.
to get the actual
Yeah.
IPWs, then we
Yes.
know we're talking about the exact figures.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Well, the straightforward proposition that is being put, Mr. Sodi, is that the total amount paid divided by the unit price yields a number of 353,400 houses, which is not more or less 250, it's far in excess of 250,000.
Again, Chair, we talking here about a project that happened 6 years ago. And I'm giving estimate, it's, you know, it could be close to what was the case, or it could be a bit far apart. But hence I'm saying that what would be useful for us, so that we don't go to and fro,
Yeah.
is to be able to have those IPWs. Then it's very specific, because it will tell us
Yes.
that this is, or these are the quantities that had to be
Yeah,
audited.
okay.
Yeah.
Let me put a last proposition to you then, Mr. Sodi, in a different way.
Yeah.
If you had been told in the IPWs to audit 250,000 rand, 250,000 houses at 650 rand per house, the total you could have charged on that basis would have been approximately 170 million, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
So 650
Yeah.
times 250,000,
Yeah.
one point.
I think
Yeah.
you.
That's correct. Yeah, about 160.
I think she wants to show you the correct figure.
160 approximately. in
160,
my-
yeah.
162,500,000. That's correct. Okay. So we have all those figures down on the record.
Would the position be that if the figure of 250 units, houses, is found to be correct, if it is what is in the IPW, would the position be that in all probability the department miscalculated to come with a higher total amount, or how would one explain the discrepancy?
Chair, I don't think there was any miscalculation.
So you think when we get to
When
the
we get, yeah,
IPW,
so it will,
we will
we'll get to,
find- it will
exactly,
correlate.
yeah.
Yeah.
But there wouldn't have been any miscalculation.
Okay.
Yeah.
In addition, and to avoid confusion, Mr. Sodi, we have perhaps been using terminology of profit margins quite loosely.
Yeah.
If you invest 100 million rand and you make another 100 million rand on top of that, that's 100%. Correct.
Correct, yeah.
If you would go to FS6, please. At page 280.
Did you say 282?
280, yeah, FS6 280. Now we know that in Khateng, Blackhead was not the only service provider. You say there were 5 or 6 others, there may have been 7 others.
It was a total of 8 service providers,
Yes.
Chair.
And at the bottom of the page, in relation to their profits in the Khateng Asbestos Project, you say the following: of course, I can tell you right now, even the other 5 companies or 6 companies that were appointed, they made exactly that. They made more than that. So it wasn't just Blackhead that made that kind of profit, all of us.
I cannot, Chair, state how much the other companies made as a profit margin. That statement obviously is incorrect. If that's what I said, I wouldn't have known. I can only speak for Blackhead Consulting, but I can't speak for the other service providers. So I wouldn't have known at all how much they would have made.
Can you explain why you would have said that in the interview?
As I've said, I don't recall I could have made it, that statement, but I don't recall making that statement. And certainly I've got nothing to back it up. I've got no way that I can back up that statement because I wouldn't have known. So it's an incorrect statement if I did make that statement from my side.
As I understand it, that's a transcript of an interview you had with the investigators of the commission, is that right? Or you have seen this document before, haven't you? In your bundle?
No.
In the documents, in the files that you have received? This transcript? Or have you not seen it before?
Yeah, I don't remember seeing.
Is that so?
Yeah, I did not receive a bundle up front, Chair.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay, well, if you haven't seen a document, just
Yeah.
say so that your answer can be understood in that context, if that is actually the case. Or if you are not sure that you have seen it or not seen it, just say so.
And like I'm saying, Chair, I don't remember saying it. I'm not saying I never said it, but I'm saying that now, sitting here and dealing with this aspect, I don't know on what basis I would have said something like that when I never had access to, the other 8 contractors. Never knew how much profits they made or what was their cost. So it could have been, Chair, that maybe it was in the heat of the moment I said it, but I certainly don't have anything to back up this statement. I don't really.
Yes, no, I'm sure if necessary, the relevant part of the recording, if it exists, can be played.
Yes. My instructions are, Chair, from the investigators that the transcript was provided.
Was provided.
Yes.
Okay, and do you know whether there is a recording that would be available if necessary?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. And maybe the one of the investigators might be able to actually give instructions that definitely if we go to the recording there will be this part. Do we know whether somebody who has listened and so to it will?
Chair, there would be direct evidence
There would be direct evidence.
as to the accuracy of the transcript, but there is a transcriber's certificate that appears at page
Yes.
357 of
Yes.
Free State 6.
Yes, I think, Mr. Sodi, you may have to, maybe not now, it might be necessary to listen if you want to listen in due course to the recording.
Yeah.
But at some stage, you'd have to make up your mind whether you say, yes, I did make the statement, or no, I did not make it. As I say, you might not be in a position to say so while you are sitting there.
No,
but
that's correct, yeah.
maybe in due course that can be arranged if necessary.
No, correct, Chair.
Yes, the only purpose of making such a statement, and according to you, if you made it, would be to somehow justify the profit you made by saying that others did it as well?
Chair, even that, I mean, I wouldn't be making a statement like that because I wouldn't know what the other contractors, what their costs would be. You know, so it would be difficult for me to make a statement like that. But like I said, I'm sitting here, I'm not saying that I didn't make it, I'm not saying I made, I'm saying that it could have been at the time that, you know, I may have made it. I don't remember, I cannot recall that. But certainly what I can say for a fact is I had no access to info.
Some did more houses than, were
That's correct.
expected to do more houses than others.
That's correct, that's correct,
Yes,
yes. That's
okay.
correct, yeah.
If we could move to another topic, please, Mr. Sodi. If you would look at FS8 at page 110. This is a letter addressed to yourself, Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, dated the 7th of April 2014 and addressed to you by Mr. T.W. Zulu, Director General. Do you recall receiving this letter?
I do recall, Chair.
And you knew that Mr. Zulu was the Director General, not of the provincial, but of the National Department.
That's correct, Chair.
And as I understand this letter, it's an appointment to the National Department of Human Settlements, a panel appointment.
That's correct, Chair.
And then if one goes to FS 8169,
Uh, 169.
169, Chair. I think we've dealt with this letter before, but for the purposes of current series of questions, we could just look at it again. It's a letter dated 19 June 2014, addressed to you by Mr. McKessie, addressed to the CEO, Blackhead Consulting. And it reads, the above has reference to your proposal submitted to this department and your appointment by the National Department of Human Settlements. So the proposal was the proposal by the joint venture to the Free State Department. We know that.
That's correct, Chair.
And the appointment by the National Department of Human Settlements would have been the appointment we've just referred to.
That's correct, Chair.
The letter continues to read, note has been taken of the above, and we wish to request your approval as follows. That the department wishes to extend your current contract secured by National Department of Human Settlements in line with Treasury Regulation 16A66 of 2005. So what Mr. Mkezi is saying here is that the department in the Free State wishes to extend to the Free State the national panel appointment.
That's correct, Chair.
And we've heard from Mr. Zulu that you can't extend a panel appointment because there are no terms and conditions in that appointment. Am I correct? Or let's leave the law
Yeah.
out of your province.
Okay.
We've debated it
Yeah,
sufficiently with
absolutely.
those that ought to know.
Yeah.
But what I thought there was unanimity on was that you can't extend a panel appointment. You can't extend if one department or if the national department has appointed a panel
Yeah.
of service providers, you can't, as a provincial department, seek to write on the back of that. You must do your own. Or did I misunderstand that
Chair,
part?
this is my understanding. And I've seen it in practice, so I can speak with confidence that it does happen. You get instances, for instance, where one sphere of government, it could be a provincial government, would say, we don't have our own panel. We want to appoint service providers. We don't want to go through the lengthy process of having to advertise and so forth and so forth. There is work that ought to happen immediately, but we don't have a panel. They would then write, for instance, to another sphere of government or another department that has a panel. And they'll say, guys, we would like to participate in your panel. Could you therefore provide us with a list of companies that are on the panel? That department would then say, okay, we're happy. If they are happy, they'll say, no, we're happy that you can participate in our panel. Here is a list. Okay? And they'll forward the list to that requesting department. So that list would be inclusive of everyone who's on that panel. And that would then be forwarded to the requesting department to say, there it is. Of course, this happens formally. You know, letters have got to be written and signed. That happens all the time. So to answer your question,
So you would say, factually or practically,
yeah,
this is what does happen that you know.
Absolutely.
But whether it's proper, whether it's in accordance with regulations, that's something you would not know.
absolutely, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, and of course we do know that a panel wasn't, or a panel arrangement wasn't extended to the Free State. You were appointed.
That's correct, Chair.
And as the chair says, whether this is lawful or not is not a department that you want us to debate with you.
And that's correct. I would stay out of that debate.
The letter goes on to say in paragraph 4 that your appointment will be subject to your company securing funds to roll out the project in line with your proposal. And as I understand, you've dealt with that issue.
Correct, Chair.
But what we do know from this letter is that Mr. Mkezi was instrumental in at least attempting according to a practice that you've now said happened frequently, that might or might not be legal, to facilitate the appointment of Blackhead Consulting in the Free State?
Sorry, Chair, do you mind to repeat Mr. Pretorius' question again?
Maybe I should break it.
Yeah, excuse me.
It was Mr. McKessie that was the actor here. He was the head of the Department, Human Settlements, Free State.
That's correct.
And what he was trying to do was to use a legal device, because he mentions it here
Yeah.
in specific terms, to facilitate the appointment of Blackhead in the Free State.
Correct.
Whether what he was doing was lawful or proper or not is not a matter that we will debate with you at the present. One goes to the next letter that I'd like to draw your attention to, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to change bundles.
Okay.
FS1 at page 465. This is a letter from Mr. McKessie to Mr. Zulu dated 19 June 2014. And
On my one, the date is not legible.
Yeah, same as my one.
Is your date legible, Mr. Pretorius?
yes, so there's another copy of the letter at FS1 214.9.
Okay, well, if you just tell me that the date that you have mentioned is correct, that would be enough for my purposes.
It appears there from a better copy that the date is the 19th of June 2014.
19 June 2014.
Yes.
And the other letter is at what page? The one that has got, is legible?
214, FS1 214.9.
Okay, thank you.
And it appears that what Mr. McKessie is asking Mr. Zulu here is to extend the contract, the national panel contract, to the Free State. You can look at the document.
Yeah, it appears so, Chair. Yeah.
In effect, what it says.
Yeah.
We agree. What is significant about this letter, in paragraph 1, it refers to Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, not the joint venture. You see that?
I can see that, yeah.
The joint venture, of course, wasn't part of any national panel arrangement or contract.
That's correct, yeah.
I'm sorry, are you still at 465, Mr. Pretorius?
Share
Are you
your
still at
question?
page 465?
Yes,
Are you still on that page?
yes. Paragraph 1 of that letter under the heading refers to Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, not the joint venture that was appointed in the Free State.
Oh, okay, no, that's fine. I think I was, for paragraph 1, I was looking at the heading,
Yes, just
because the
right.
heading is like a paragraph on its own.
Yes. In a better copy, it's underlined,
Yeah,
that heading.
okay.
Paragraph 3 of that letter is the letter that talks about the extension of the contract through the participation process. But we've settled that issue. Mr. Sodi, if you could now go to FS2, page 99. That is a statement of, well, that is part of a statement of Ms. Diedrich's. We've referred to her earlier. It's an affidavit that commences at FS 295. She identifies the document at page 99, but let's go there. It's at page 111 of FS2. This is a letter also from Mr. Mkhize, but now to the head of Department of Housing. That's Ms. Diedrich's, correct?
That's correct.
But that would have been the Department of Housing in Khateng at that time.
That's correct.
And it's a letter which appears in paragraph 2 of the letter to say the Free State Department of Human Settlements hereby requests your department, that's now the Khateng department, not national, Khateng,
Correct.
to extend the services of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited in line with Treasury Regulation 16A 6.6 of March 2005. So we're here talking about an extension from province to province, not from national to province.
That's correct, Chair.
The next paragraph reads, it is therefore in this regard that approval is hereby sought that you provide written confirmation to extend same in line with your approved terms and conditions as contained in your instruction to perform. We know by way of example that in the Khateng Department project, the term and condition relating to price per unit was 650 per unit.
Correct. Yeah.
That term and condition wasn't extended to the Free State.
That's correct.
And we've looked at the other terms and conditions that were set out. They too don't appear to have been extended. Remember we talked about the terms of reference and the detail of those terms and conditions.
Are you referring to the SLA? The ones that were in the SLA?
No, not the SLA. Well, there were no terms and conditions in the SLA.
Okay.
You agree with that?
Yeah, yes.
The only terms and conditions were contained in an instruction to perform work.
That's correct.
And that instruction to perform work would have contained a unit price of 650
That's correct, Chair.
per unit. So we know that that wasn't extended ultimately to the Free State. But this
That's correct.
letter here purports to seek permission or purports to seek approval for an extension of the Khateng contract to the Free State. Correct.
That's correct, yeah.
So now we have so far two arrangements in place. One, the national panel, and two, the Khateng contract.
Yeah. I can explain that briefly. Chair, was initially, according to my recollection, the Free State Department wrote to the National Department requesting that they extend the panel to the Free State. That's the letter, the previous letter, Chair, that we looked at. Then there was also a subsequent letter, which is the letter that we're looking at now, which also came from the Free State. But in this case, it wasn't addressed to National. It was addressed to the Gauteng Department of Finance. And in the end, what happened was the Treasury Regulation 16A 6.6 was utilized and through the Gauteng Department of Local Government Housing, not National Treasury. So that correspondence between the province and National Treasury in the end was not utilized. So what was then transferred, or extended rather, was the Gauteng Department of Local Government Housing to the Free State. So that's where according to my understanding of how that regulation functions, was the reliance was therefore on Gauteng, simply because we performed a similar service that needed to be performed in the Free State. And I think that was the reason why it was decided in the end that, let's utilize your appointment in the Gauteng Department.
Thank you, Mr. Sodi. Did you know this was happening at the time?
I saw correspondence. I was aware that there was some correspondence happening between the Free State and National and as well as Gauteng, but I was not party to a lot of this correspondence. I've seen some of these letters, but I was certainly not involved.
But,
as such.
Mr. Sodi, you've given a detailed explanation before the short adjournment of the practice that you say was prevalent in relation to contracts.
Yeah.
You've also now given a detailed explanation of the sequence of events in relation to the attempt to secure your appointment in the Free State by way
Correct.
of some form of transfer or another.
Correct.
Did you know this at the time?
I got to know in the end when, all this had happened, that the reliance was placed on our appointment in Gauteng. That's what eventually,
When did you get to know this? The time the contract was concluded with you?
it was before we started with the execution of the project.
2014.
Yeah, it would have been 2014.
So you knew in 2014 that Mr. Mkezi was communicating with the National Department, Mr. Zulu, and you knew that Mr. Mkezi was communicating with the Head of Department of Housing, Khateng, that's Ms. Diedrichs,
Correct.
in order to facilitate the finalization of your contract in the Free State.
That's correct, Chair. I knew.
But just to return to Free State 2111, we know that the approved terms and conditions, in fact, that term and condition that was fixed and could be changed under no circumstances, didn't find their way from Khateng to the Free State.
Which one is it, Mr. Pretorius?
650 rand. Remember, it was
Okay.
an immovable,
Okay.
unchangeable term and condition of the contract. That you would be paid 650 per house.
That's correct.
It was
yeah.
put to you in your own words on a take it or leave it basis.
That's correct, Chair.
That term did not find its way from Khateng to your contract in the Free State.
That's correct.
Let's go again, please, to 4 August 2014 now in the timeline. My apologies, back to Free State 8.
Or bundle FS8.
Which page are we looking at?
Bear with me a moment, please. 176, if you would, Free State 8, FS 8 176. This appears to be Ms. Dedrick's reply to Mr. Mkesi. Because it refers to Mr. Mkesi's letter of 15 July 2014, which we've just dealt with.
That's correct.
But what we see here in paragraph 1 is a statement by Ms. Dedricks dated the 4th of August 2014 in this email or letter. She says, I hereby confirm my decision taken on 21 July 2014 that the Khateng Department of Human Settlements granted approval in terms of Treasury Regulation 16A 6.6 for the Free State Department of Human Settlements to participate in the contract arranged by means of a competitive bidding process from the database of the Khateng Department of Human Settlements for professional resource teams where Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited was appointed from. That, on the face of it, appears to be an approval to extend a panel contract.
I'm not sure if this is extending the panel contract, Chair.
Well, your contract to perform work, in terms of an instruction to perform work, you and the 7 others in the Free State on the Asbestos Project, that wasn't the result of a competitive bidding process. As I understand it, whatever competitive bidding process there was to get on the panel in the first place.
That's correct.
So what she's referring to here is a panel, not what Mr. Mkesi was referring to, which was an individual instruction to perform work. He's talking another language.
Look, Chair, I not the author of the letter, so it's going to be difficult for me to respond to that question to say that she was referring
Mr.
to.
Pretorius, seeks your own understanding of what is being said here, which did concern your company.
Yeah.
Yeah, to say, what's your understanding of what the author is talking about here?
Okay. So my understanding is that subsequent to a letter that was written by the Free State Department, by Mr. Mkesi specifically, to request, or rather to to get the Khateng Department of Human Settlements to confirm that we were indeed appointed there. So this was the response from Khateng, from the acting HOD, confirming that indeed Blackhead Consulting was a service provider in the department. And, you know, obviously that if that particular regulation, the treasury regulation, had to be implemented, there were certain things that needed to happen. So it was in response to a request from a letter that was written by the HOD in the Free State.
What she says, and I think you've confirmed this, but let's just deal with it so we can move on. In paragraph 1 is that she has made a decision, and she made it on 21 July 2014. That's 6 days after the letter of 15 July 2014 to which she refers. And the decision is that the Free State Department of Human Settlements may participate, and I'm changing the quotes for grammatical reasons, in the contract arranged by means of a competitive bidding process from the database of the Khateng Department of Human Settlements or Professional Resource Team. That is the Free State, the Khateng panel contract.
Correct, yeah.
We know that in the Free State you were appointed in terms of an individual contract. An SLA, which appointed you, not a panel.
That's correct.
And it also refers, in case there should be any confusion, in paragraph 3, this letter, to the fact that the database will lapse at the end of August 2014, and we know we've dealt with that.
Yeah, correct.
So far, we have national involved in a process to extend a national database to Free State, which you say fell away. We have Mukesi asking for a particular contract to be extended. He in fact refers to an instruction to perform, a work one can read. And now we have Diedrichs purporting to extend a panel arrangement to the Free State. You nod.
No, yeah, I agree.
But what is also important, Mr. Sodi, is that what Ms. Diedrichs is doing here is taking a decision involving Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, not a joint venture. Correct?
That's correct, yeah.
I just want to make sure that we have the same understanding of what the paragraph 1 means. Ms. Diedrichs is confirming a decision she made on 21 July 2014, and the decision is that the Department of Human Settlements in Khateng was granting approval in terms of that regulation. In terms of the regulations stated there. For the Department of Human Settlements in the Free State to participate in the contract arranged by means of a competitive bidding process. The contract arranged by means of a competitive bidding process, which contract would that be?
This would be, Chair, the panel contract.
That's
So-
the one that was arranged by way of a competitive.
That's correct, yeah.
to get onto the panel.
Absolutely, yes.
And then she says, from the database of the Khateng Department of Human Settlements for professional resource teams, where Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited was appointed from. So the contract, she talks about the Free State Human Settlements Department being granted approval to participate in a contract.
That's correct.
And that contract is the contract of getting onto the panel in Khateng, as far as Blackhead is concerned.
Correct.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Not the contract which Blackhead obtained after being on the panel, namely the assessment and auditing of houses.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
this particular paragraph here,
Yes,
Chair,
this paragraph
would refer to that contract
of getting onto the panel
getting onto the panel.
and not of actually doing the work.
That's my understanding.
Yes, okay.
That's my
Is that your understanding as well, Mr. Pretorius?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we are on the same page.
But it is, well, I've put the question. I'm not going to summarize it again. It may just cause more confusion. To move to another point, we've established that what Ms. Diedrichs is talking about here is Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited and not a joint venture.
Correct, Chair?
By the 4th of August 2014, the date of this letter, the joint venture proposal had already been made to the Khateng Department. Sorry.
Free State.
Apologize, to the Free State Department.
That's correct, Chair.
That was made on the 28th of May 2014, and the proposal appears at FS 1457, but if you agree with that, we don't need to go there.
I agree with it, yeah.
If you look at FS2, page 100,
1 second, Mr. Pretorius. Of course, paragraph 2 of that letter at page 176 reveals that the author of the letter seems to contemplate that Blackhead is going to be given work to do by the Free State Department, because she says the approval, and she's talking about the approval in paragraph 1, is subject to the conditions that Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited must approve in writing that it is willing to do the required work for your department, and that the participation of Blackhead Consulting may not negatively impact on their performance towards the Khateng provincial government. That's something else. She does contemplate that as a result of this approval that she was giving, Blackhead would do some work in the Free State.
Yeah, my assumption, Chair, would be that
Yes.
she would make a statement like that because in the letter that was addressed to her by her counterpart in the Free State, it was specific that they're dealing with Blackhead. On that sense.
Repeat that last part.
I'm
That
saying
day, it was
they-
specific that day.
they intending to appoint Blackhead to do some work in the Free State. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Correct, yeah. Correct, I agree with it, yeah.
yes. For the present purposes, the letter at FS2 111 that you've just referred to from Mr. McKesey to Ms. Diedrichs, or to the head of Department of Housing, I'm not sure precisely when Ms. Diedrich took office, contemplates the extension of the contract to Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited.
That's correct, and that's precisely the point I was saying that, she would have indicated that second paragraph because she was already aware, based on the letter that she received from the Free State, that it had to do with Blackhead Consulting.
But we know at that stage that the proposal for the performance of the work in the Free State was a proposal by the joint venture. And that proposal was made earlier on the 28th of May 2014.
That's
Correct.
correct,
And if one looks at Diedrich's statement in FS2 at page 100, one sees her response to those circumstances.
I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Pretorius. I just want to finalize on that letter at page 176. I'm sorry, Mr. Sodi. I'm disorganizing both you and Mr. Pretorius.
No problem.
If we go back to that letter of Mr. Dirks at page 176, I note that she says in the second paragraph from the end of the letter, that she says, I'm reading from the middle, your department may also consider, or, I'm sorry, she says, it should further be noted that the Khateng Department of Human Settlements currently has in place a database of service providers that provide PRT work. The database will lapse at the end of August 2014 and processes are in place to establish a new database. Your department may also consider this, should the identified service provider not agree or not be in a position to do the required work. If you follow this route, you should embark on the procurement process from the companies provided and enter into an own service level agreement with a successful bidder. What is your understanding of this part? Is it that if the Free State Department, would be free to approach one of the service providers in the panel, on the panel?
That's correct, yeah.
And if that service provider was happy to do the work, then they would go ahead and make whatever arrangements. But if the identified service provider was not prepared to agree to do the work, then there would have to be a new procurement process to be followed. Is that your understanding?
Chair, that's my understanding. Hence, there was a letter that was also written to us requesting us to confirm that we accept the appointment from the Free State.
Yeah.
So that this paragraph talks to that aspect as well.
Yeah.
But if we had said that, look, we've got too much work, or we've got a lot on our plate, we don't think we'll be able to take additional work in the Free State, then they probably would have went to the panel and said, okay, fine, let's maybe identify someone else on the panel. And, that's basically what is captured here.
Okay. Mr. Pretorius.
Thank you, Chair. If we could go back to FS8, please. At page 177.
What's the page number, Mr. Pretorius?
177, Chair.
Okay.
Now, we know from previous correspondence that we've just dealt with, Mr. Sodi, that when Mr. Makesi wrote to Ms. Diedrichs on the 15th of July, he was referring to the extension of a contract, whatever contract that might have been, to Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited.
That's correct, Chair.
And it appears on FS 8177, a letter addressed by yourself to Ms. Diedrichs,
That's correct.
and you knew her as the acting head rather than the appointed head at that stage. Is that correct?
Yeah, she was the acting HOD, Chair.
Says, Dear Ms. Diedrichs, appointment of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited for the asbestos eradication program in the Free State Province. Now, this letter is dated 7 August 2014. We know that the proposal that the joint venture would do the work in the Free State was dated the 28th of May 2014.
That's correct.
You say to Ms. Diedrichs, we acknowledge receipt of your fax dated 4 August 2014 in which you respond to the head of Department Human Settlements in the Free State Province regarding the appointment of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited for the asbestos eradication program. Correct?
Correct.
So you are telling her that it's the appointment of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, who'd done work for her in the Free State, that was at stake here.
That's correct.
And you say we would like to confirm the following. One, that Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited is willing and committed to perform the required work for the Department of Human Settlements in the Free State. Correct.
That's correct.
And you sign it, Mr. Edwin Sodi, in your capacity as Chief Executive Officer of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited.
That's correct.
Why didn't you tell her that it was the joint venture that was going to be appointed?
At the time, Chair, my understanding was that if one of the parties to the JV has done this sort of work, in this case, we were on the panel on the Khateng Department of Human Settlements. We had done, we had already completed the asbestos audit. So my understanding was that if on the JV, one of the parties had done work, then, it's not an issue at all. Of course, my understanding there could have been wrong. But that's how I understood, that Blackhead had done this work. It was on the panel from the Department of Human Settlements in Khateng, and it was part of a JV. So my understanding at the time was that there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But, it turned out later that, my understanding could have been incorrect. But at the time, I didn't think that it was a problem at all.
No, but Mr. Sodi, both Mr. Makesi and yourself, in seeking to participate in a Khateng contract, tell Ms. Diedrichs that the party in the Free State that will do the work is Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, when both Mr. Makesi and you knew that it wasn't. It was a joint venture, a different entity. Correct?
Correct, Chair. This is exactly what I'm explaining. It's my understanding was that if one of the parties to the JV, had done the work, which was the case in this case, my understanding at the time was that it wasn't an issue. The fact that there was a diamond heel, which was not mentioned, at the time, I didn't see that as a problem, and I can also illustrate this point with another example. That if you look, for instance, at the way government works when it comes to partnerships or JVs. Give you an example. If there is a tender that gets issued out, usually before submission, there would be a briefing session, which is meant to really give clarity to the potential bidders in terms of what ought to happen. What would happen in most cases is that if, for instance, there has to be a partnership, the company that attends the briefing session can partner with any other service provider or any other company that did not attend the briefing session. So in this case, it could be, for instance, Blackhead goes to a briefing session, and we write on the attendance register, which is usually also a requirement when they do the evaluation, because some of them are compulsory. We can choose anyone else, for instance, if we want to partner. We can choose anyone else or any other company that did not attend the briefing session and partner with them or form a JV and submit. That is acceptable. That's the standard practice. That is what happens in most cases. So that's why even in this case, Chair, I would have seen it in that way, because it is allowed that for as long as one member of the part of the consortium or the JV or the partnership, as long as one member had complied in as far as the compulsory briefing session is concerned, that is acceptable. And I looked at it in that context. But like I'm saying, some of these things could be legal, which I would not be able to deal with. In that. But that's a normal practice, Chair. That's what happens in the industry.
Well, let's leave aside what the Treasury regulation permits and doesn't permit. And just for the record, it only permits a contractual arrangement to be extended involving the same parties, but put that aside for the moment. If it was a matter in which you had the attitude on the 7th of August that it was perfectly permissible and in order for the joint venture to do the work, why not just say it?
Again,
in other words, Mr. Sodi, I think the point that Mr. Pretorius, or what may be triggering his question, and he wants your comment, is this. Mr. Mukhetsi and yourselves and yourself know that it's a joint venture that's going to be appointed in the Free State.
Correct.
When Mr. Mukhetsi writes to Ms. Didder, he knows that it's a joint venture that will be appointed.
That's correct.
When you write this letter, you know that it's a joint venture that's going to be appointed.
That's correct, Chair.
He finds it strange that both you and Mr. Mukhetsi
Didn't specify.
don't appear to be upfront with
Yeah,
Ms.
yeah.
Dedras to say, we are going to appoint a joint venture. These are the names. We don't think it matters that Diamond Hill was not did not participate in Khateng because Blackhead did participate. So you are open about it because you see nothing wrong about it.
Yes, yeah.
But on the contrary, it appears that coincidentally, both of you don't see the need to tell Ms. Dedras that actually it's a joint venture.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that's what is triggering his inquiry.
No, I mean, I would admit that in hindsight, in retrospect, we should have specified that. We could have done that. But like I'm saying, I had a completely different understanding. But I take the point, and I'm saying that given a second chance, I'll do it differently.
Yes.
Yeah.
Of course, if it was one of you, maybe one could leave it at that.
Yes, yeah.
It's just strange that both of you don't mention it.
Yeah.
But
And-
of course, you can't speak for him.
yes.
You can only speak for yourself. But
Yeah.
I'm just saying that that's the context.
Exactly, but also, again, not wanting to get in a to and fro sort of debate, and I can't certainly speak on behalf of Mr. Mukhetsi, I can speak for myself because I wrote the letter. But I would assume the only reason why he would have omitted the JV aspect was because it wasn't the JV that was appointed in Khateng, it was Blackhead that was appointed there. Had it been a JV, I'm sure that you'd have said, listen, we're intending as the Free State Department to appoint this JV. But as it turned out, it was only Blackhead. And I can only assume that that's only the reason why, he would have just been, said, listen, we're referring to Blackhead here and nothing else.
Mr. Pretorius,
Well, that's.
I hope I understood what triggered your
Yes,
question
and I think
correctly.
the point has been made by Mr. Sodi that the reason for confining the identity to Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited in the communications with Ms. Diedrichs, both from Mr. Sodi's side and from Mr. McKessie's side, was because you knew that the only contract that had been entered into in the Khateng was Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. So it was deliberate. I mean, when you wrote Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, you knew what you were doing.
I knew what I was doing, Chair, and as I said, again, that I didn't see anything wrong at the time, doing it in this particular fashion, because of the examples that I gave previously about, how it works. For instance, when one party has complied, if there's a consortium or a JV or a partnership, if one party to that partnership has complied with certain provisions, then it's acceptable that you can do it that way. But I take the point, and I'm saying
Yes.
that, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Sodi. So you deliberately put Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited in there when you knew it was the joint venture rather that would be appointed in the Free State, in order to allow Ms. Diedrichs to say that the Khateng contract, which involved only Blackhead, could be extended.
That's correct. That's correct.
Right. Well, she said it did matter. Because she said had she known that it was a joint venture, she wouldn't have extended the contract. Because it wasn't permitted in terms of the law. You know that?
I don't.
Do you want to see her affidavit to that effect?
Yeah, I'm sure if it's in the affidavit, you can look at it.
Let's look at FS2, page 100. Perhaps we should go back to FS2 99.
What page are we at? Mr. Pretorius?
FS2 99.
Okay.
We could just go to paragraph 14.4. She was shown the joint venture proposal addressed to Mr. McKessie, and she says in paragraph 14.4, the proposal is dated 28 May 2014. You know that that
Yeah.
is the joint venture proposal to the Free State Department.
Correct, yeah.
Therefore, as of 28 May 2014, Mr. McKessie may have been aware of the fact that Diamond Hill will form a joint venture with Blackhead. Well, he knew that as a fact, not may. He did
Correct,
know.
yeah.
Correct. Why Mr. McKessie did not mention this in his letter dated 15 July 2014 to the HOD Department of Human Settlement at Khateng is unknown to me. Then she says, over the page FS2 100, if the involvement of Diamond Hill were divulged to me, I would not, and she underlines not, have issued my letter dated 4 August 2014. Then she refers to another document, or the same document. At all relevant times, Diamond Hill was not on the Khateng database. If the letter from the HOD of the Free State applied for permission to appoint Blackhead Diamond Hill JV, I would not have been able to give permission in terms of Regulation 16A 6.6 because this JV was not a registered vendor in Khateng. Correct?
Correct?
Everybody knew that.
Correct, yeah.
And that's why a reference was only made to Blackhead.
That's correct.
If we could then move on. You would bear with me a moment, please. Would you go to FS 8179, please?
What's the page number again?
FS 8179.
Bundle FS8, page 179. Okay.
That's a letter from Mr. Makesi dated the 11th of August 14 to yourself as the CEO of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited.
Correct?
And its title or heading is Appointment of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited for the Asbestos Eradication Program in the Free State Province. And it says the above has reference to the concurrent approval by the Khateng Province Department of Human Settlements dated 4 August 2014 regarding your participation in an agreement currently secured by them. Whether that's referring to a panel or a specific contract doesn't appear to be very clear, so I'm not going to press you on that. But let's look at paragraph 1. Yeah. You formally agree to participate and extend your services. Now this is to you, Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, to the Department of Human Settlements Free State in line with the terms and conditions of their IPW. So it seems that what Mr. Makesi is here talking about is the instruction to perform work that existed in the Free State, in Khateng.
That's correct.
And we've been through this a number of occasions. That is not what formed the basis of the contract in the Free State.
Because the amounts were different.
Yes, and
Correct.
there were other differences, but
Correct,
we
yeah.
can go there as well.
Yeah.
Then over the page, Free State 8180, FS 8180, that's a letter from yourself to Mr. Makesi. Do you see that?
Correct.
Now it appears for the first time that the joint venture, at least on the letterhead, appears. You see that?
Correct.
And although the previous correspondence deals with, and the invitations deal with Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, you confirm here, well, let's deal with the first paragraph. We acknowledge receipt of your fax dated 11 August 2014, in which you request our written response regarding the appointment of Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited. You see that? Specifically, Blackhead Consulting, not the joint venture.
Correct.
Correct. We would like to confirm the following. 1, that Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited, JV, is willing and committed to perform the required work. So you're quite aware of the distinction in this whole saga of events between Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited on the one hand and Blackhead Consulting Pty Limited joint venture on the other, because you mention them both separately in the same letter.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is a deliberate introduction of the JV to Mr. Bekesi, correct?
That's correct, Chair, but you would also recall that the proposal,
He knew it was going to be the JV.
yeah,
That's
so the
point you
proposal
make.
that was submitted in May,
Is not going to hear for the first time about
yeah,
JV now.
yeah, it was, that proposal was very specific, that it's a JV that is applying for them.
Well, I note that even though you do include JV in paragraph 1 in that letter, you don't mention Diamond Hill. Is there a reason for that? Wasn't
There
the
wouldn't
joint
have been
venture,
any specific reason.
wasn't the joint venture Blackhead, Diamond
Yeah,
Hill,
it was.
JV?
It was. I suppose that should have been specific there, that it's a Blackhead Consulting Diamond Hill JV.
So we move from a point where Mr. Mukhetsi, in correspondence with Ms. Diderix, doesn't mention the JV at all, and you don't mention the JV in the other letter that we looked at a few minutes ago. But here, there is a difference. You mention Blackhead Consulting Pty, and then you say JV,
Yeah,
but you don't put in
Put the full name.
Diamond Hill
Yeah.
at this stage. Maybe
Yeah.
later you do, but at this stage you don't.
we don't, but Chair,
It's
if
like
you
a
look,
gradual.
no, Chair, if you look at that letter, on top, right next to Blackhead, there is a Diamond Hill stamp. I don't know if you've got that letter in front of you.
Oh, yes, I see that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it
Yes.
wasn't
Yeah, so there's-
to conceal
Yes.
anything. It was,
Okay,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that may be a fair point, yeah.
Yes, and in the footer of the letter too, Diamond Hill is mentioned as well, in fairness to Mr. Sodi,
Yes,
in
no,
the
no, that's a
green
fair point, yeah.
bar. What is instructive about this particular letter, Mr. Sodi, that it was your understanding that what was going to happen in the Free State was your appointment as a JV and not the appointment of any panel?
That's correct.
Well, we are at 1 o'clock, Mr. Pretorius. Maybe we should take the lunch adjournment, or do you have a last question before lunch?
Don't think it makes much difference, Chair.
I
We've got a lot more questions.
I
to
leave
ask.
room just in case you had
No,
one
Chair,
more question.
I'll move on.
Yes. Okay, all right. We'll take the lunch adjournment and resume at 2 o'clock. We adjourn.
All rise.